Hello, friends. It's nice joining you on this online platform for the Bible Translation Conference 2023. My name is Olalekan Bamidele, and I am presenting on the topic Cognitive Linguistics and Bible Translation, the case of metaphor translation in the Yoruba Bible. I serve as a consultant in training with the Bible Society of Nigeria, and I'm also running off my MA in Translation Studies at the Africa International University in Nairobi. For my presentation, I'll be looking at the conceptual metaphor theory, looking at tenets and some of its criticisms. I will present a brief summary of the Yoruba people, language and culture, and I'll examine the connection between the CMT and Bible translation before applying this to selected metaphors from the Bible into Yoruba. Language is an essential component of human communication, culture, and the society at large. And whenever language is being mentioned, it's talking about what Chomsky describes as the human essence, that is, the distinctive qualities of our mind that distinguish human beings from animals and from other objects of creation. So the implication is that language is highly essential to human beings, and it contributes to the sharpening and the interpretation of our daily experiences. This being said, efforts have been made over the years to improve how language is being spoken, how it is made more enjoyable and comprehensible to the listeners. And that's why features like hyperbole, similes, metaphors, parallelisms, alliterations, onomatopoeia, and so on have been introduced into language theories. Now for my presentation, I am focusing on the conceptual metaphor theory and its applications to the field of Bible translation, using selected instances from the Yoruba Bible as my case studies. In the full paper, I have quite a number of case studies, but for this presentation, I'll be using just 3 or 4 of those case studies. My attention will be more on explaining the metaphor in the Yoruba language and how this can be made use of in metaphor translation for the Bible. So, having said this, what is the conceptual metaphor theory? The CMT was propounded by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson in a series of write-ups they did in 1980, 82, and so on. And as at today, it's one of the most developed, empirically tested and refined subfield of cognitive linguistics. Several researchers have gone into conceptual metaphor theory and how it affects the world of linguistics as a whole. It is defined as understanding one domain of experience in terms of another domain. Now, in this definition, one domain is abstract and the other domain is concrete. In other words, one domain talks of the process, while the other domain talks of the product. So it's a source domain to target domain instituted theory, where the target domain is understood in the concept or in the light of the source domain. Features of the source domain are mapped into the target domain to understand what is being said about the target domain. And that's basically what the conceptual metaphor theory is all about. So it is branded by a proposition that relates the target and the source domains and brings about meaning beyond what is literally expressed. Some of the main features of the CMT include that it's a non-factual linguistic expression that is important and germane to human comprehension and communication. Also, while metaphors generally are pervasive, the conceptual metaphor tries to establish a non-deliberate form of language. That is, it is neutral and it creates artistic effects in very natural way, mapping the features of one domain to another in their natural context and without introducing any foreign or any strange idea into it. Now, CMT distinguishes between image metaphors and the conceptual metaphors itself. For the image metaphor, this includes the traditional metaphors, similes, and analogies. And Lakoff makes an example from this when he said, "My wife, whose waist is an hourglass." Now, in this image metaphor, the author is simply saying that his wife has a body whose shape is similar to the shape of an hourglass. Now, anyone who knows what an hourglass looks like can easily understand what the writer is saying or what he is implying. That is to say, his wife has a tiny waist. Now, with image metaphors, you can simply go on to say, "My wife has a tiny waist," instead of going the metaphorical way of saying, my wife has a waist that is as tiny as that of a hourglass. So the image metaphor has a kind of direct linkage with the agency in question without resorting to metaphor usage or making any mental connection to the metaphor. So the mental link between the two concepts is a temporary one, and it's just for the purpose of describing one of the two images. On the other hand, conceptual metaphor goes beyond the descriptive rhetoric purpose. It goes beyond the poetic purposes. While the image metaphor tries to link the feature of one image with similar features of another, conceptual metaphors make multiple connections across the entire conceptual domain, that is, across the source domain and the target domain. There are multiple connections, multiple features that are connected together in the usage. So the conceptual domain is the body of knowledge within our conceptual system that organizes related ideas and experiences. And in conceptual metaphor, the target domain is well understood by linking the equivalence of the source domain to the target domain. The things you can find in the source domain, we try to link them with those of the target domain, and that helps in understanding the message of the writer or the speaker, as the case may be. And despite the CMT being a popular theory, it has come under some criticisms. I'll just mention this in passing so that I have more time to talk about the metaphors in usage. Now, some of those criticisms include in the area of its methodology, where it places more emphasis on concepts rather than words. The area of its direction of analysis, where it advocates a top-down approach in place of the bottom-up approach. Then in the category level of metaphor, where the CMT claims to be of a superordinate status rather than the ordinary. Then the metaphor embodiment, where it places emphasis on the universal, mechanical, and monolithic aspects instead of the non-universal aspect of linguistics embodiment. And finally, it has been criticized in light of its relationship to culture, because the CMT places more emphasis on universal bodily function as against the interface of body and context. Now look at the Yoruba people and language next. The Yoruba people are known as the Yaku people. because they have this greeting prefix eku, which is prefixed to almost every greeting and salutation in Yoruba. You have eku owuro, which is shortened to ekaro and means good morning. Ekasan, good afternoon. Eku orire, congratulations, and so many other eku prefixed greetings in the Yoruba language. The people known as Yoruba are located predominantly in the southwest part of Nigeria, and they number over 40 million. They can be found in other West African countries like Togo, Benin Republic, in places like Cuba, Brazil, and the Caribbean. And in those various places, they speak the same Yoruba language, but with different dialects and tonal variations. Yeah, but the language remains the same, and the people share affinity in terms of culture, customs, and religion. The orthography of the Yoruba language is patterned after the Roman script, although before the advent of missionaries, there has been the use of the Ajami script, the Arabic writing, for the Yoruba language, but the advent of missionaries introduced the Roman script as the official writing script of the Yoruba language. Yoruba as a language makes use of metaphor. It's a prominent feature in the Yoruba language. In fact, there is hardly a conversation or speech in the language that is not spiced with metaphors and other forms of figurative expressions. So it's very common to have speeches in Yoruba laced and spiced with metaphors and other forms of figurative expression like proverbs, anecdotes, alliterations, and the likes. And not just metaphors, Yoruba also makes use of the conceptual metaphors, and I'll be emphasizing some examples of that in the next slides. The first one is the conceptual domain that maps human beings and animals. You have human beings and animals. And for this example, I'm using the statement Eshine Tade, that is, Tade is a horse. Now, this expression does not mean that the person called Tade is a four-legged animal with horn and tail, but it is mapping the features of strength and speed for which the horse is known against the person called Tade. And that means that Tade is a strong and agile fellow, one who can walk long hours without showing signs of tiredness. He has the strength, he has the speed, he has the resilience, and is able to walk for a long period without showing signs of tiredness. The second domain I'm looking at is the human beings are objects, and I'm using the statement Alejo ni owo as the example here. Alejo ni owo simply means money is a guest, and that is based on the premise of hospitality that the Yoruba people are known for. And when a guest comes visiting, such a person is taken care of, entertained, and made to feel at home. Now, the same treatment meted out to guests is mapped against the one's care for money, and that will determine how long the money or the wealth will stay with the one handling it. In other words, the way a person handles money or wealth determines how long such a person will enjoy the wealth. If you handle money well, it stays long with you. If you don't treat it well, then it goes away. That's the Yoruba belief behind this statement, Alejo ni owo, money is a guest. Next, I'll be looking at the conceptual domain of food is friend. And I'm using the sentence Onjeni or Reawo, that is, food is friend to the skin, for my explanation here. Now, the Yoruba people place so much value on friendship and relationship, and there are so many proverbial sayings to support this. Now, just as a friend nourishes and cares for his friend, in the same way, good food, good food nourishes the skin and helps to, protect the human body against different kinds of diseases. And as a result, the food is a friend to the skin. That is, good food brings nourishment to the skin and to the human body as a whole. Next, I look at that which maps body parts against royalty. That is, body parts are kings. And I'm using the statement Oju ni Obara to illustrate this. And in pre-colonial Yoruba communities, the kings hold sway. They are the ones who play oversight function over their people, over their subjects, and whatever the king says is final. The king sees for the people, hears for the people, and dictates to them what should be done at what time. So in the same way the king performs oversight function over his subjects, it's the same way the eye is said to be important because it coordinates the affairs of the other body parts. And the functionality of the eye impacts on the effectiveness of the other parts. The eye sees for the other parts of the body and guides in which direction the body moves. So say Oju ni Obara. Once the eye is gone, then effectiveness of the body, functionality of other body parts becomes impaired. Next one is love is a vehicle. That's the next conceptual domain. Love is a vehicle. And I'm using the statement Ife won ti fi ori ṣánpọ́n as a case, which literally means their love has had a collision. And this expression is used to describe a case where two lovers could no longer continue their love relationship due to irreconcilable differences. Now, it is mapped against the domain whereby a vehicle is moving and has an head-on collision with a stationary object or with an oncoming vehicle, and is thus unable to continue in its journey. So, love here is seen as a vehicle which is on a journey, and in that journey it had a collision and is unable to continue the journey. And then you say their love has had a collision. That is, the love has come to an end, and the couple or the partners involved are unable to continue in the journey. Lastly, I use human beings are metaphysical. That's the next conceptual domain. And for this, I use the example Ewele ni onímọ̀ ẹ̀rọ náà. That is, the engineer is a gnome. Now, in the Yoruba cosmological view, gnomes are believed to be highly skillful metaphysical beings who possess skills of different kinds. And there are different gnomes associated with different professions. So when a person is seen to be highly skillful, the Yoruba describes the person as an ewele, a gnome. And this doesn't mean that the person is a metaphysical being or an extraterrestrial being, but it means that the person is exceptionally skillful and good at what they do. If the person happens to be a medical practitioner, they can relate such a person to an Osoyin, which is the Yoruba deity for medicine and healing. So in this case, human beings are mapped against metaphysical beings who possess great skills at what they do. Now, having that understanding, I look at the CMT and Bible translation, because the conceptual metaphors can be found in every aspect of human communication and expression, including the Bible, where different metaphors are used to convey different layers of truths to the listeners. And I'll pick on a few examples here. One of them is the human beings are plants. Human beings are plants. And in for an example, I use this Gbongbo Ìdílé Jésè. which literally translates as the root of the house of Jesse, or the root of the family of Jesse. You find that being used to describe Jesus in his messianic form as the root of Jesse. You find that in the Bible. You also find the human beings are animal metaphor, where Jesus is described as the lion of the tribe of Judah. And in Yoruba, that means Kiniun Eya Judah. Now, all of these metaphors and many more that are in the full paper, they are used in the biblical text as part of the regular and daily expressions of the people. They simply reflect the people's way of life and how they view a situation or a person. And they are deeply steeped in the Jewish culture in which they are used. Now, how can translators effectively convey these metaphors in their work among indigenous people in different locales of the world? That's the next thing. Now, the conceptual metaphor as a theory helps translators to identify some implicit metaphors that may have been mistranslated from the cultural or linguistic perspective, because the culture of the source text might be different. In fact, in many cases, it is different from the culture of the target text. The grammar and syntax of the source text are oftentimes different from the grammar and syntax of the target text. And so the CMT helps in identifying these mismatches and how they can be corrected and correctly translated in the target language. Not only that, those who are involved in cross-cultural translation can derive value from the CMT as they convey ideas from one context to the other. Also, some of the metaphors of the ancient Near East, making them more explicit, will help the believers and translators in a different cultural milieu to process the biblical figurative expressions and help them to avoid likely misinterpretation, misunderstanding, and misapplication. This may arise if the metaphors are taken literally, but if they are translated with the conceptual metaphor theory in view, some of these things can be avoided. Now, for my biblical case studies, I'm using two from the Old Testament and one from the New Testament for this presentation, while others are contained in the full paper itself. Genesis 49 verse 9, in the deathbed blessing of Jacob to his 12 sons, he described Judah as a lion's cub. Now here, Jacob was not saying that Judah was literally a lion's cub, because that would mean Jacob himself to be a lion. But we all know that Jacob was not a lion, he was a human being. So referring to Judah as a lion's cub means that he was referring to the kingly aura that Judah would come to possess, because the Messiah would come from his lineage. So that would help translators understand that the features of a lion that is known to their audience should be brought to play in translating this particular metaphor, and not just saying that Judah is a lion's cub. But then a simile might be more appropriate in translating this. Previous Yoruba texts have rendered this as Omo Kiniuni Judah, that's following the literal rendering of Judah is a lion's cub. But a more appropriate way might be to use a simile in saying Judah da be Omo Kiniun, that is, Judah is likened to a lion's cub. Now, in this form, it is easier for the reader to quickly understand the features, identify the features of a lion's cub and a lion itself, and then relate them to the personality of Judah as being likened to a lion's cub. Another is the one in Proverbs chapter 17 verse 6, where you have grandchildren are the crown of the aged. Grandchildren are the crown of the aged. And the Yoruba social political setting identifies crown with kings. It is only kings that make use of crown, that wear crowns. Now, the author of Proverbs did not intend to say that children are the kings over their parents. Rather, he's talking about what the crown symbolizes. And what does the crown symbolize? It symbolizes joy, symbolizes strength, symbolizes authority, it symbolizes continuity of a dynasty. And so, when the grandparents see their children, they have joy and they are assured of the continuity of their lineage, just as a crown demonstrates the continuity of a king's reign and authority. Now, in translating this passage to Yoruba, earlier versions have said, Ọmọ ọmọ ni adé orí arúgbó. That's literally conveying the source text metaphor into the target text. But rather, the meaning can be unpacked to state that ọmọ ọmọ fi ayọ̀ fún arúgbó bí adé tí fi ayọ̀ fún ọba. And that is self-explanatory enough, that grandchildren give joy to the aged as the crown does to the king. Now, this unpacking helps the reader to see that it's not as if the grandchild or the grandchildren are the kings over their grandparents, rather that they are their source of joy and an assurance of their lineage continuity. And the only example I have picked from the New Testament for this presentation is Matthew chapter 5 and then verses 12 and 13, where Jesus described believers as the salt of the earth. Now, in the Greco-Roman period places so much premium and value on salt. So important was salt to them that slaves are sold to get as little as a bag of salt. And merchants that dealt in salt then, they are considered as very important, and they amassed great wealth because of the value placed on salt. Also, in the Yoruba thinking, in the Yoruba worldview, salt is a seasoning agent, salt is a preservative, and salt is a healing agent. So when Jesus was describing the disciples as salt of the earth, he was emphasizing their worth and the responsibilities placed on them as his followers in a world full of evil and corruption. Now, earlier Yoruba versions have rendered this text in the literal form saying, Ẹ̀yin ni iyọ̀ ayé. I am proposing a rendering that reflects the intended meaning, which is the value or the worth of the disciple in the world. And that's why I've said, Ẹ ṣe iyebíye nínú ayé bí iyọ̀. That is, you are important, you possess worth or value in the world in the same way salt possesses value. Now, from all of this, we can deduce that conceptual metaphors convey more meaning than they literally express. They cannot be taken at face value. Rather, the embedded meaning must be understood. And receptor languages will do well to unpack these meanings, these embedded meanings, and reflect it in their translation so that the local recipients will be able to understand the message that the original author is intending to pass across. However, the unpacking should be done with care so that the translation does not become a commentary or a paraphrase. Since metaphor is a feature of almost every language, metaphors that depict the same meaning as the source language metaphors can be used to convey the message in the target language. What I mean is that if a target language has a metaphor whose wordings are different from the metaphor of the source language, but which has a similar meaning or function, then such can be used in place of the source language metaphor to express the same meaning. And finally, another alternative to metaphor translation is to retain the foreign elements and then use a footnote to explain its meaning to readers. I am not a strong fan of footnotes because not many devotional users of the Bible go to read footnotes. But where it becomes necessary, the metaphor can be retained, can be allowed to retain its foreignness, and the footnote used to explain the meaning for readers, hoping that they would care enough to look at the footnotes and read the meaning. In conclusion, I posit that the CMT applies across all aspects of human linguistic expression and communication, and its importance to Bible translation and interpretation cannot be overemphasized. Since all believers desire to clearly understand Scripture and avoid unnecessary misinterpretation and misapplication, translators should try as much as possible to make use of every tool that can help the understanding that readers seek for in the Bible. Metaphors enrich language, and they should be encouraged as much as possible, so long as the meaning of the text is not sacrificed for the aesthetics value that metaphors tend to add. And so, here is my summation, that cognitive linguistics play quite a huge role in helping to make the work of translators easier. And one of the ways it does that is the use of the conceptual metaphor theory to help in translating metaphors from the source language to the target language. I'll be glad to attend to your questions on the Woover platform. Thank you for listening and have a fruitful deliberation. I am Olalekan Bamidele, a consultant in training with the Bible Society of Nigeria. Thank you. God bless you.